Welcome everyone. Welcome to another episode of Changing the Game. I might be a little bit rusty because it has been a couple of months since our previous episode, so apologize me for that. But today I have a awesome privilege of having Aprill Allen here. So we met Aprill last year when we did annual angel investor breakfast here in Perth, and she attended remotely. It was quite a nice one. So I'll read Aprill intro or bio, but then we go beyond the bio soon. So bear with me for a sec. So here we go. Aprill Allen is co-founder and COO of Tractor Ventures. Tractor provides a non-dilutive financing alternative for tech founders wanting something different. Together with her business and life partner, Matt Allen, she has an early-stage investment portfolio of more than 50 companies. Quite impressive. Whoa. Aprill deploys her process improvement expertise and get things done approach across Tractor Venture portfolio, as well as advise the portfolio companies on scaling the customer service and support functions. Cool. Now that I've read your bio, normally, Aprill, my first question is, who is Aprill? Beyond the bio, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your story?
Sure. So Matt and I met at work in the late 90s. We were both working for OneTel, if anybody remembers back that far, a telco that flamed out in the early 2000s. Well, he went into web development land and eventually startup land himself. I stayed in operational sort of functions, network operations, IT support, that sort of thing, and I was there for 13 or so years before becoming a solo consultant focused on knowledge management, and especially how knowledge management helps those sorts of teams, internal IT teams and customer teams, work more effectively and provide a better customer experience. So that's what I spent sort of the last 10 years doing until sort of taking the leap and joining Tractor full time. So that's really what I've been doing full time, in the last 18 months since I've sort of parked my consulting. In our spare time, we have Fridays off as a business. So in my spare time, I have an art studio, and I'm often painting on a Friday in there. So that's what I do over the weekends, and we've got 2 teenage sons. So that's about everything, just about.
Very nice. So in your Fridays off, you have your work as an artist.
Yeah.
So Aprill, did you graduate in any tech area? Did you ever thought about working in this sort of ecosystem?
So I didn't do any university. I've had a few attempts at mature age degrees, but they've been arts focused. In the late 90s, it was probably mid 90s, I went to, if anybody remembers, the old Computer Power Training Institute in Sydney. I put myself through a computing certificate there, and it was during that I got that job at OneTel. That's the only sort of real, graduate thing you could say I've done in tech. The rest of it has just been hands-on experience in help desks, mucking around, doing a bit of dev myself over the years. And it was really just the exposure to what Matt was doing while he was a builder, a startup builder, and absorbing the conversations he was having as an early stage investor. And then eventually I got on that train as well.
Nice. So I may have a question on that later on, because we have been talking a lot about education and the traditional education versus a more modern approach to education. So it has lots in what you just mentioned there.
Yeah.
So you guys run Tractor Ventures, right? So and I'm working in that sort of ecosystem. I have some sort of expectation of what it is, but what it is coming from you. So what is Tractor Ventures, and what is that you guys provide as a differentiation? Who are you trying to help?
Yeah, so we help those founders who traditionally aren't super attractive to venture capital. They may not have the same sort of aspirations. Like they still have ambition, but they don't necessarily want to go at that rocket ship pace that venture sets you on that path towards. But they've got a product that's just as meaningful to their customers. And if we talk about the rockets versus tractors, and how rockets are expensive to make. There's a big payoff if they land, but they often blow up along the way. Where farmers rely on their tractors, and if you say you're going to take a tractor off a farmer, they'll be ropeable. So we support the tractors. And we do that with revenue-based finance. So it's a non-dilutive model. It's a loan, and it comes back to us via a top-line revenue share of the monthly revenue. We still wrap around the founder and give them whatever help we can give them to help them with their growth challenges. As we would as angel investors, we also do that through our Tractor Ventures village, we call it. And it's a place where the founders can help each other. We can share, expertise with them, help them connect up with the people they need. And that sort of depth of knowledge across our team and in our investor base within Tractor itself is really hard to beat. And just the network effect that's available through our team, just from all the years of experience that Matt's had building his network. And Nogger's our entrepreneur in residence, Nogger Egglestein, who people would know from SBE. Jody Imam, also past SBE, past founder. So we've got lots of expertise in the team that's really hard to come by. Yeah.
That's awesome. I so much in what you said. So, okay, first of all, I love the way you guys made the analogy between the rockets and the tractor. Huh? So I'm feeling a bit guilty because, in our approach to, founders coming to talk to us, we talk about, high tech, high growth, and etc. So you're coming the opposite way. I say, okay, so you have these sort of companies, but the companies that don't have that, they have a space with you guys here, the tractors. I love that. So I also love the fact that you treat your communities, call it a village. So very nice. So you mentioned there is, in your bio, you talk about having more than 50 companies in the portfolio. And by the way, before I go there, so the other thing as well, so you don't take equity, you don't dilute them. It's maybe, so you have a financing sort of model where you're actually helping the startups in the early stages and not necessarily taking too much of the equity. So my next question is about your portfolio. It's 50 companies. So would you be able to share stories with us about, I don't know, maybe we don't say that, but maybe you have a preferred one or someone or a business that you love and you guys being able to support. Can you share some of those stories with us?
Yeah, so it's probably worth mentioning how we got started. And that was back in 2012, I think it was, when Xero did their dual listing on dual IPO on the Australian and New Zealand stock exchanges. So what that did was gave us a reason to start a self-managed super fund so that we could invest that way and create capital in our super fund. So that's how we got started in angel investing, was using that money. And then over time, Matt earned bits of advisor equity in some other startups, and then that got us onto another way that we could invest through the equity in our mortgage at one point. So it sort of grew after those things. So BuildKite's been a successful early investment for us, and that's where that sort of advisor equity came from in the beginning. And they've been steadily growing. So that's a really exciting one that we're close to. One of my favourites is Flow of Work. They came out of an Antler cohort in Sydney, I think the 2020. Helena just did a pitch to the She Loves Tech crowd last week and won that pitch event. So that was pretty exciting to see that happen. So yeah, they're still early, and I'm keeping an eye on Flow of Work because as a knowledge manager, what their roadmap is quite exciting. Unlocking that sort of talent within a company that you can lose track of when you get so big and you don't know who has what skills that you could be using. So that's a bit exciting, and I'm paying close attention to that one too. But yeah, we've got a lot of good ones. Mr. Yum, GoTerra, Abuso, that's another one that we like. Yeah, so there's lots of great names in there that would be familiar to lots of people that would be listening to this.
Yeah, very nice. So it's funny, like I can see your eyes, shiny when you talk about some of them. So that's the passion we have of our portfolio, isn't it? So
Yeah.
there is one thing that you start mentioning that I'd love to ask a question on that. So you mentioned about you guys being able to use superannuation funds to deploy some capital in this area, and then mortgage and etc. So there are some facts and myths in this angel investing sort of activity, which is, you need to be rich to start your portfolio, or you need to have this money or that money. So it is something that we deal with every day as angel or puff angels, and here as in our business Vitch Ventures as well, is trying to explore those avenues to democratize that angel investor community.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about some unusual sources of capital coming from superannuation for more risky or venture capital, and then your mortgage. So can you speak a little bit more about that, more in the perspective of you and your partner? So, and you're putting family savings and maybe risking future savings on these sort of thing. How you guys feel about that? How is that conversation for you?
Yeah, so it was interesting back in the day because I didn't have any of this. I didn't come from startups myself, so it was really Matt's exposure that I was leaning on, and he developed a really solid, I don't know, a solid read of the potential of a business idea and also the potential of a team. So he's got a really great radar for a team's ability to execute, like the people behind it. And between us, we're quite different in terms of risk appetite. He, if you can't tell already by now, like he's very much right up on the risky end of the scale. You could say, I wouldn't get upset with you if you described me as conservative. It is true, although I have come up a bit more, through, having had 20 years with Matt, you're going to come up the scale. So how it would come out in our dynamic in talking about investments that Matt was interested in. So he would get excited about something. He would then have to come home and explain it to me. So he'd have to pitch that, this was worth us investing in. And so the size of our investments is generally between 10 and 20K. So it's not a huge amount, right? But I was quite sensitive to Matt's moods around our household income at any point in time. So, the risk profile of the moment. So, and like I said before, I didn't have the language at the time, but in retrospect, I understand now what was happening. So he would come home and pitch something. And if last week he was in a bad mood about our mortgage, or he was uncomfortable about the reducing buffer in our mortgage or whatever, I would ask that question and go, okay, well, are you confident about it? Because last week you were not that confident about our situation. So that was us sort of having that little bit. That was the extent of our DD, if you like. But it was us kind of covering what the risk profile was from one week to another when some new investment was on the radar. So that's how we were managing it. But it's also worth reminding people that the hurdle for people is that they need to satisfy is the sophisticated investor certification to be able to invest in sort of angel rounds anyway. So we were able to obtain that from having done that zero investment and having done well off that IPO listing. So that's what sort of gave us that piece of paper to be able to participate in later investments.
That's brilliant. So I can listen to what you're saying. I can picture the conversations between myself and Renata, my wife, and and having that sort of opposite sort of risk appetite as well. And I know a little bit of how that conversation can go.
Yeah.
It's a nice step, but it's nice to have that balance because sometimes the optimistics, maybe sometimes we lured by the promises and the dreams and etc. So it's interesting that you mentioned it's a few things as well about you mentioned about the sophisticated investor certificate. So I think both your family, my family. So we fortunate enough to have an event that was able to give us the paper for us to be able to participate in these things. So it is an area that we're trying to be more inclusive and work out the policy to be able to bring more people into it. So I understand, Aprill, Tractor Venture is not a fund, right?
No, it's not a fund. We have sold some equity in Tractor, so we have some investors in Tractor, but we've also taken in a debt facility so that we can fund the loans ongoing. Yeah.
Okay. So because I was going to mention, and from what you just described, so you also not in that sort of syndication of angel deal sort of thing. So because we're seeing the likes of our friends of 1013 or Cheryl Mack or us Pitch Ventures, so kind of also not having funds, but are doing the syndications deal by deal and trying to democratize the check sizes and etc.
Yeah.
So what is that you looking for at the next founder?
Well, from a Tractor perspective, we look at tech-enabled businesses that are making a monthly recurring revenue of at least 15 grand, and there's a history of sort of 3 to 6 months of growth, and a healthy runway of 5 to 6 months. So they as long as the operating financials look good, we're happy to give them some revenue-based finance. So it doesn't matter to us what industry they're in, but generally speaking, it should be tech-enabled. but that could be anything. It could be e-commerce. So it is pretty broad mandate from that perspective. So really, as long as their operating financials are in reasonable order, reasonable to good, we're happy to have those conversations. From an angel perspective, we're not doing that much angel investment these days. There's a couple of little follow-on things that are on my radar that are coming up soon that I need to be ready for. But we're doing most of those non-tractor investments through Side Stage these days, which is a fund that Matt and a few people set up and launched last year. So Side Stage Ventures is where we do most of our household investing these days.
So nice. So let me have a question on this. So you, as I mentioned before, so we put a panel last year for the angel investor annual breakfast for angels. So and you in our panel there was pretty good. So there was a little bit of in putting that panel together, there was a bit of that sort of hatch of trying to put a panel of women and talking about diversity. So it has been a year so far. So are you seeing more women participating in the ecosystem, like both with investment hat, as an investor hat or founder hat? How you have seen that moving along?
I think the awareness of each other, like the women in the ecosystem are we're expanding our own network. So it feels like things are getting better just because we know more of who we are in the ecosystem. The investments themselves, SBE did a bunch of research that they talked about at their event a couple of months ago, and it's sadly not that. It's still not even close to being, approaching, diverse investments. So I think there's still lots and lots of work to do. But the problem is deep and structural, and it's to do with women not having senior roles, boardroom roles, C-level roles, anywhere near as many as the men do. And so it means that once they get to sort of my age now, they don't have the money available to them to be able to invest, even if they could get their sophisticated certificate and participate in stuff. So really, it's a problem that goes right back in structural issues. So it's a policy thing. There's got to be governmental intervention. We can only do so much as an ecosystem of investors. We can definitely do our best to represent more diversity. But if the income isn't there for the women in the first place to be able to invest later, that's always going to be a problem unless we can do anything at the policy level.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So, and I'll touch on another subject that's somehow related to it. So, you mentioned about having teenager children. So, same with me. So, you have teenager children at home. So my question is more like, do you have conversations at home or something you want to share about the fact that so my generation I was educated to go to university to do law, medicine, or engineering, right? So I ended up choosing the engineering because I knew I liked math. So it seems like today this is changing, right? So the conversation with teenagers is completely different. So, the priorities of the choices are different. So as a mom or in your a group of friends, so is that part of the conversation? How that goes in your perspective?
I think it's important that when they express an interest in something, that you do what you can to double down on enabling it. So our younger son, who's 15, is in year 9 at the moment. He came home one day and said that he wanted to change schools. He wanted to go and do the trades rather than waiting to go through an engineering degree at uni. Like, he wanted to get his hands on, and he can get his hands on from year 10. So he came home and said he wanted to do that. So we took him to the information night. We visited the school. We went through the process, and he'll be starting there next year. So he's excited. We're excited for him. And that's great. Like, I never expected to have a tradie son. We are not, have never had hand skills between the two of us, Matt and I. So I think it's skipped a generation. So that one's really interesting. We talk about our work all the time, frequently around the dinner table. So they're exposed to our sort of work with startups. They've heard Matt talking on the phone, and especially these last couple of years with all the work from home, they've been exposed to all of that. So, it's not unusual for us every now and then to say to them, well, why don't you come up with a business idea? So we sort of plant that seed fairly regularly every now and then too. We've taken them to Startmate pitch nights a few years ago. We did that pretty regularly. So they've had lots and lots of exposure to startup stuff and business through us. And as far as encouraging sort of diversity, gender diversity, and seeing sort of women in positions of leadership, my mother has had a career working in sort of creative arts, in merchandising as a brush letterer, but she's had a resurgence in later life, providing brush lettering workshops to students at RMIT and traveling around globally doing these workshops. So it's really nice for my kids to see that happen as well, So I just like that, when they can share an interest that they've identified for themselves, that we can help them sort of get more exposure to it.
That's very good. I will ask you a last question. Believe it or not, that as normally we do this for 30 minutes, not to be too long, and etc. as you may have experienced, as I did as well, that 30 minutes goes by quick. So Aprill, what about geography, right? So you're talking from the East Coast, I'm talking for the West Coast, and we in Australia. So when we look at helping the ecosystem, so are you focusing more local, Australia, or even global as well? How you see that?
So we're focused on Australia and New Zealand. Like, Tractor is Australia and New Zealand. Our investing personally is Australian, usually, and it's because we know who the founders are. We've often already got a relationship, so it's easy for us to know the DD is not super taxing when you already know who the people are. So that's what we've sort of found. It was interesting sort of launching Tractor at the end of 2020 because we had to raise that equity, like taking investors into Tractor, into the management company, on over Zoom. The normal way to do it was to go have a lot of face-to-face coffees and beers and whatever else, but we raised all of that and launched all online remotely. So that was an interesting way to do things.
Interesting to hear that perspective. Yes, we went in a remote world, which the borders suddenly go down because remote connection, you can be talking to anyone and anywhere. Yeah. But you kept that sort of kept investing where and the whole the regulation environment that you're familiar with. That's quite interesting. So Aprill, I think this is just the start of us having, further chats. So it's a shame that those 30 minutes go so fast. I hope I can be a guest in your village, so we
Yeah.
keep in touch. So I'm extremely grateful for you participating, changing the game. So I hope the people that listen or watch our conversation can get out of it. So I think this was brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Hey everyone, this is Aprill Allen. This was another episode of the second season of Changing the Game. So in the second season, we're talking with investors and founders. It's all about innovation. I hope you like this. And I'm looking forward to having you in the next episode as well. Thank you. Cheers.